Would you trust a product just by reading about it? Probably not. Welcome to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we explore strategies and insights to help the AEC industry build brand awareness, spark engagement, and establish authority with their target audience. Today's episode is all about engineering trust, how strong relationships, a reputation for reliability, and delivering real results can build not only a service business, but a lasting legacy in the AEC space. Today's guest is Vinu Abraham, Vice President of Products and Environmental for Intertek's Building and Construction Group. Vinu and I go way back, all the way to 1995 when I was with Monsanto's Saflex division, and Vinu was running the hurricane test labs in West Palm Beach, Florida. Then we collaborated closely to bring impact-resistant glass systems to the market. And over the years, we've continued to cross paths from testing and certification to strategic marketing and business development. Today, Vinu leads Intertek's building and construction team and continues to focus not just on technical excellence, but on building lasting partnerships with manufacturers and industry professionals. Vinu, thanks for taking time out of your crazy busy schedule and joining the show. So to kick things off, for those who may not know who you are or what your story is, can you share a little about your journey from HTL to Intertek and how your roles have evolved along the way?
Yeah, Sean, always good to talk to you, man, and thanks for this opportunity. Obviously, I've been in the TIC test inspection certification industry since 1991, so it's quite a long time now. I'm an Indian kid that grew up in a small country in West Africa called Nigeria. I moved to the United States in '87 to study wind engineering, and I was fortunate enough to go to Texas Tech University in Lubbock and got my undergrad and graduate degrees in wind and structural engineering. Right coming out of college, one of the professors I had done a lot of my graduate work under pitched an idea to me of a small startup he was looking at getting off the ground in Florida called Hurricane Test Lab. And this was a small testing lab birthed directly out of Hurricane Andrew and the code changes that happened down here. And at the time, Sean, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I mean, I had studied hard to be a structural engineer, and hurricane codes and running a business is not certainly anything I had prepared for. But I like the idea of working in Florida. I certainly like my mentor who had given me my start in my career. And so took him up on the opportunity. You and I met shortly thereafter. And it was a very fast, I would call it MBA degree that I earned through the School of Hard Knocks, because I was hired as an engineer to join an organization. And as I was moving from Texas to Florida, the gentleman who was running the small company for this firm decided to pursue other interests. And so my mentor called me up and sort of asked me, hey, are you still on your way to Florida? And I go, yes. And he goes, well, that's great. He goes, I got some good news for you. I go, okay. I also have some bad news. And I go, well, what's the bad news? And he goes, your boss isn't there anymore. And I go, okay, what's the good news? And he goes, you're the boss, And so that was my introduction to HTL and managing people. I mean, obviously we turned HTL into a little bit of a powerhouse in the southeastern United States. And one of our major competitors, Architectural Testing, had been acquired by private equity back in like 2008, 2009 timeframe. And so we knew them, they knew us. We were good competitors in the same industry. And so they started kind of pursuing us pretty hard because we had a presence in a market they didn't, right? It was complementary services, but they served kind of the rest of the US. And we kind of had the Southeast tied up. And, as things worked out, we ended up selling HTL over to ATI, and I kind of joined the ATI senior leadership team and started managing a slightly bigger portfolio than just the HTL organization. Now, ATI being owned by private equity, in 2013, the PE firm had gotten to their 5-year hold period with that investment, and so they went ahead and put ATI on the street. And many companies looked at it, both private equity and strategic, pursuers. And as it turned out, Intertek acquired ATI in 2011, right? I'm sorry, in 2013. And so with the Intertek acquisition, it opened up new doors. Frankly, I think Intertek had a kind of a small market position in the industry that ATI was well known for, and that HDL had been well known for. And so they were buying management talent and market access by making the ATI acquisition. And, I've been with Intertek ever since, and, have held many roles in Intertek. I mean, I was in operations, Intertek being a multinational global organization. I spent about a 5-year stint in global business development, and really the focus then was to take what we did in North America and try to expand that into other markets that Intertek is well established in. And in 2018, some of our senior team members announced their desire to retire from the organization after 30, 40 years of service. And so the gentleman I was working for called me up and said, "Hey, you're an operator. You've run businesses before. I kind of had you in the wings, kind of helping us expand to other parts of the world. And I can really use you back in North America." And so then I moved back into operations. And, today I look after a fairly large team. It's about 1,000 professionals that are scattered across the US, Canada, parts of Europe, parts of the Middle East. And we have, about 22-ish labs that we operate. And we touch all streams of the building and construction industry, right? So the team I look after, we can test products, we can certify products, and equally importantly, we can follow those products into the built environment and then put our consulting hat on and sort of make sure that how they're being installed is actually fit for purpose, and the building owner gets the performance they're looking for. So it's, if you were to ask me, Sean, growing up in northern Nigeria, that, hey, do you think someday you'd be looking after, several $100 million for a multinational, publicly traded company living in the United States? I don't think I would have bet on myself. I mean, I really don't, because it's not something I ever dreamed of. And, it's been a fascinating journey. And I think the thing that has really kept me interested in this industry is I've yet to have 2 days that are the same. I mean, I really enjoy solving our employees and our clients' challenges and their needs. And so it's very different on a day-to-day basis. But I'm still able to stay connected to where I started, and I still consult with clients of mine that I've had for over 30 years on products they're developing for the market. But it's been a pretty fun ride.
Yeah, what a journey. And Intertek, such a powerhouse in the industry. But let's go back now. Let's go back to the mid '90s and those early days of working together. And you're right, we met. I think when I came on to Monsanto, it was about '93, and it was kind of the Wild West back then, as you know, when it came to testing and with all the new hurricane codes because of Andrew. And I mean, it was something else. And we got to know each other pretty well in those early days. Just with all the work and promotions that we were doing together. But what I want to ask you is what did that experience teach you about the role of trust in bringing new products to market, particularly in that time frame?
I mean, in that time frame, and even today, Sean, the thing we sell is trust, because our clients are coming to us with a need, right? And the need is generally, I make something, and I need to be able to demonstrate that it meets what the building code requires it to meet, and that it can be used reliably by their customers, who are the owners and operators of all the structures we live and work in. And they're counting on us to do our job right, because once the product is in, and the paint is in and the furniture is in and people have moved in, if the product doesn't perform, it's very costly to try to mitigate that, right? And so the thing I always, and I think it's sort of been my brand in this industry to this day, Sean, is I use this statement very often, both to internal and external stakeholders of Intertek. And here's what I tell them: you're paying me to give you reliable advice. You might not like the advice I'm giving you, but I'm going to give you what you need to make an informed decision with. And sometimes that advice is, and even though Intertek is a testing and certification business, right? Sometimes that advice is, you don't need us. This need that you think you have, There's no code requirement for that need. And you'd be better off spending your dollars here, here, and here, and you'll still get access to the market you're trying to get to, right? And that often takes clients aback, because I think people assume that, when you call somebody up, right? Imagine, Sean, you go to a car dealership and you're trying to buy a car, and the sales guy asks you, what are you trying to do with the car? And you say, well, I got a wife, I got kids, I like to go to the beach, I want to put a bunch of stuff in this car, we like to camp, I want to be able to travel with it. And then you look at him and you go, hey, that's all great, I'm glad you want to do all that, but a two-seater Ferrari isn't going to get that job done for you. You need to probably go down the road to the Toyota dealership and get a Sequoia. You see what I'm saying? And so
absolutely,
I've been known to do that. And the reason I do that, Sean, is because the way I look at it, right? Every customer that's willing to put their product in our hands, we're playing for the life of the product. I'm not playing for the quick win. I'm playing for what you and I have, which is we grew old together, right? And that's, we grew old together because I gave you good, reliable advice along the way that allowed you to accomplish what your goals were, whether it was at Monsanto or Oldcastle or, all the other stops you've had in your journey. And so, yeah, in our line of work, Sean, trust is what we sell. The moment you lose trust, there's nothing left to sell. Nothing, anyway.
Right. And it's so true. And it kind of leads into kind of my next question here about, and you've kind of answered it already, quite honestly, is kind of this building lasting relationships, right? With manufacturers, the people you work with. And it all starts with that baseline of trust. And we've talked to other folks about, hey, listen, we may not have the right solution for you, but we're going to tell you where you can get that right solution.
Yeah.
And that builds the relationships and potentially long-lasting relationships. And just to reiterate that on your end, is that kind of the mindset going in? Because you'd mentioned earlier, 30 years of people you still have relationships with, right, in the business.
Yeah, 100%. We have a mantra at Intertek, Sean, and it's called doing business the right way for all stakeholders, internal, our employees, external, our customers, shareholders who are counting on us to run a business that's going to grow and give them value for their investment in us, right? And so there's only one way to do business the right way. We've got to have the highest level of ethics, the highest level of trust, the highest level of understanding of what's going on in the market, and be ready, willing, and able to tell our clients all the information they need to know. Sometimes it's not information they want to hear, but data is the value we sell. And if you don't have confidence in your data, then, like I said, you've lost the plot, right? It's not gonna stand up to the test of time if you build an enterprise on something that's based on cutting corners and looking the other way and this, that, and the other. I had a call with a client of ours this morning coming into the office, and the guy called me up, and he's got a project he's about to run, and this client happens to be based in India, and they're producing some product for use in not only India but other parts of the world. And the guy called me up and he goes, man, I really hate to call you on this because I need a favor. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And he goes, we had a job that came in, and my guys were in a rush, and they picked a local provider who did the work, and it wasn't Intertek. I go, okay, how'd it go? The guy goes, I got a passing report. Okay, I go, then why are you calling me? Right. He goes, because when I read the report and watched the video, it was very clear to me that provider had looked the other way when my product was being tested and gave me a passing test report. And he goes, I can't have that in my organization. And so he goes, obviously, this is a teachable moment for my team, that there's a reason we deal with organizations that have a firm commitment to looking out for us. And this is a case where we hadn't done that. And now I need you to help me expedite something because I've lost all that time I had for the job. And now I need you to help me kind of get it through the system sooner than a normal customer would be, and I'm willing to compensate you for that, whether it's an expedite right. or work the weekend or whatever, and it kind of pained me to hear that, Sean, because look, take my Intertek hat off. we're all custodians of the same industry, right? We all play in the same industry. And when we have other competitors in our industry that are willing to cut corners for a buck, look the other way when it comes to deciding if something passed or failed or whatever, eventually the public is going to be impacted, and it ultimately gives all of us a black eye, right? And that's not really something we should be doing as an industry that's built upon public trust. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I love the philosophy. I'm curious from your position, how do you, first of all, integrate that philosophy downstream to your people? And then secondly, how do you promote that to prospective new clients? Because it's one thing saying it, right? And if they haven't experienced it, you want to get them in the door so they can experience working with you and your team. So internally, how do you get that message across? And then externally, how do you kind of promote that way of doing business?
Yeah, I mean, look, internally, it's reasonably simple, mainly because it starts with the top for us, right? So when I look at our group CEO, Andre Lacroix, who's based in the UK, Andre's slogan is, at Intertek, we invert the pyramid. Andre always says, Andre, work for the 44,999 of you. It's not the other way, right? And, we all as leaders try to live that mantra. I spend a fair bit of time crisscrossing multiple operations of ours, both in person and virtually. And it's all about letting the people know that any member of the team has the authority to stop work, period. If you feel something isn't going exactly as it should be, we're deviating from the standard, the specimen hasn't been set up correctly, the specimen wasn't allowed to cure properly, it doesn't really matter to me, right? All of us have the ability to walk up on any active project and stop work if something isn't being done correctly, right? And sometimes I think people worry about that because they feel like maybe there's going to be some retribution to me. I'm delaying the client's schedule. Look, we're a for-profit corporation. Obviously, we have financial goals. When you slow a project down, that's going to impact whatever the performance is. I get all that, right? I get all that. But again, in our line of work, I'm thinking about this for a second, right? So Sean, I'm talking to you. You're sitting in an office, we're having a nice conversation. I'm pretty sure you're counting on the fact that the space you're sitting in is going to keep you safe the rest of the day from whatever nature throws at it. I'm pretty sure you're counting on that the contractor built it correctly, that there's adequate lighting, the AC is working correctly, you're breathing clean air. If it starts raining in Tampa where you live, you're counting on stuff not coming into your building. And that happens across millions and millions and millions of people across the world on a daily basis, right? So we have a role in that chain. And the key is we've got to hold up our end of the deal as people in this industry and know that we get paid. Job one, besides the health and safety of everyone, job one is do the job correctly, right? At all times, do the job correctly and provide reliable advice at all times, no matter what pressure is on you, because one of the things we see, Sean, is, I'm pivoting a little bit to our clients. Clients come to us, right? And the common thread is they can never develop product fast enough. They're always behind the curve for some reason. Somebody in sales made a promise to somebody that they would have whatever it is by a certain timeline. And the product development folks are always behind the ball, right? They're always chasing some kind of deadline that just keeps getting, closer and closer to them. And they tend to put a lot of pressure on us. Hey, I need you to speed it up. What are you doing? Can we hurry this thing up? And, I spend a lot of time coaching our people and our clients on, you can either pay us to do the job correctly, or here is somebody else you ought to call that maybe is willing to do the job, but not necessarily correctly. And again, as a service provider, that's a gutsy thing to say, because I'm making myself vulnerable. I mean, the client could walk down the road. I get that. But Sean, I mean, we're doing thousands of tests a day, every single day, all over the world. And at that volume, if the work that's being done isn't being done correctly, it's going to cause a major problem for Intertek. And I mean, we're an organization that's been around for, 130 plus years, and we're not going anywhere. I mean, way back in our roots, are guys like Thomas Edison. I mean, the world knows Thomas Edison. You follow what I'm getting at?
Oh, yeah.
And that's who we claim, right? So we take that very seriously, that we have a responsibility to stay the course and to build this thing and make sure it's built to last. And it really comes back to our ability to do our jobs correctly, do business the right way all the time.
Let me switch gears on you a little bit. I think one of the things most companies, regardless of what they're in, challenge they have is pricing, right? So it's always, people are trying to always push your price down. Competitors can do it for this and this. With you guys, is that, I have to assume you guys have that challenge, right? Where people are coming out, and you guys really seem high, or I can go next door for this. And what is your basic approach or strategy when you're dealing with price to value?
Yeah. I mean, look, if our value was price, we're going to lose every single time. Okay. We just are. I mean, we're a premium provider of service. Okay. But we're a premium provider of service that's going to jump into the fire with our clients when something hits the fan. And generally, the ma and pa's we compete against, when the going gets tough, they're gone. I mean, they're going to file for whatever protection they need, or they're going to sell all their assets, and they're going to move on, right? Intertek, the value we bring is you're getting access to an unparalleled group of expertise, okay? People that are really passionate about what they do, subject matter experts that know kind of the ins and outs of what the products are made out of, how the products go together, the markets they have to go into, what's going on in the regulatory environment. What are the things you have to be aware of as a supplier to make sure that all the different parts you're picking to put into your product, that they're actually going to get along with each other. Material compatibility is a big deal. And if you pick the wrong group of components and put them together, you could end up with an unexpected result, right? And so we try to educate our clients on, when you come with Intertek, number one, you get the brand, okay? You get something on your report that is recognized worldwide. When you present someone an Intertek report, they're going to go, oh, okay, you tested with these guys. All right, we're good with it. We know how those guys are built. We know what their commitment to quality is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Number two, and this is something we preach as an organization, we always try to put ourselves in our client's shoes. We always try to understand what their mindset is in where they're trying to go, so we can give them good advice on the most efficient way to get there. Okay. Number three, when the going gets tough, we're right there with them. We're not going to tell them, nope, not on us. You got to call somebody else. I mean, our mantra is, if our client has a problem, let's go solve the problem together.
Which, by the way, is great advice for any business, right? I mean, this is when you can put yourself in your customer's shoes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we say, and I say this all the time, Sean, because far too often when a client calls you and they got a problem, human nature is to get defensive and start figuring out, okay, was that on me? What did we do? And what we preach is, if the client's got a problem, solve the problem first. Then have a closed door session with the client and try to figure out what caused the problem. Okay. And look, if it's something they did and their clients that you want to do business with, they'll figure it out with you. And if it's something we did, we'll figure it out with them. But until the problem is solved, the problem just keeps growing. You follow what I'm getting at?
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of what we tell our clients is, look, if you're looking for cheap, we're not your guys. Because we have too much of a brand. We have too much at stake to be the cheapest guy on the planet. We just do. Okay. I mean, there's a reason that, for instance, Mercedes-Benz commands the price it does for their vehicles versus a Hyundai. And Hyundai is a great company. I'm not saying they're not, but they're kind of in different ball games, right? And so there's a reason a Genesis, which is a Hyundai product, commands a much higher price point than a Hyundai does, right? Because you're getting kind of a level of performance that comes with that brand. Do you follow what I'm getting at?
Yeah, it's true. Let's switch gears a little bit. We talked to a lot of folks about how the pandemic has kind of changed the interaction with clients. And did you guys see a shift in how you did business or worked with clients? And obviously you work very closely with people and people come to your labs and work with you, and you go to people in consulting roles. Did you guys see any major or make any major shifts as a result of the pandemic?
I mean, I think, look, obviously we all learned together during the pandemic. Intertek was an organization deemed an essential organization. So we largely kept working through the pandemic because the world was relying on us and a few others to help test and certify the developments that the world needed, whether it was ventilators or masks or whatever it is, right? And so we had to keep going as a result of that. I mean, there are a lot of things we figured out. Okay, number one, we had to get a lot closer to our people and our clients. I mean, if you think back to the pandemic, the number of video calls that were going on, both internally and externally, I mean, it was next level. I mean, I remember there were days I'd come to work and I'd have 20, 30, virtual meetings with people. It was just all day, nonstop, back to back to back to back. But I also think what we learned through the pandemic was, even though we were talking a lot more to people, we weren't as connected to people as we were before the pandemic, because it's real hard to build kind of a interpersonal rapport with somebody if you only talk to them on a screen the entire time. If you don't get to, interact with them, have a meal with them, read their body language, read how they're responding to what you're saying. I mean, it's hard to get all of that out of a phone call or kind of a virtual setting, right? It made us probably much more flexible than a traditional TIC operator probably would be expected to be. I mean, we had to open our eyes to hybrid work, to remote work, where applicable. It's hard for technicians to be remote because you have to be in the lab environment to do the work. But certainly, it opened up some new doors. I think the other thing the pandemic did, which was a positive, is it gave us access to a bigger pool of people to recruit from to join our team, because we were no longer as hung up on where the person was. We were really looking for the skill set, and depending on the role. So if I was recruiting a chief engineer, to me, it's really academic where the chief engineer is based. As long as the chief engineer is available and, periodically they're making the rounds and talking to customers and whatever, I don't physically need that person to sit in West Palm Beach, Florida, if they prefer to live in Los Angeles, California.
I think that was a big mind shift that a lot of people made, that exact point.
Yeah. So I think it opened that up. I mean, Sean, we learned that you have to be wired a certain way to be just as productive in a remote setting as in an in-office setting. And it's not a diet that works for everybody. I mean, the ones that do well at it, right? This is just what I saw. The ones that do well at it, they treated their home office as their office. So get up on time, get dressed, get in front of your computer, dressed like you were going to work. And then whatever your lunch break is, stand up and walk away from your computer. Go have a different, go to a different part of your where you are, have your meal, get your break. And then when lunch break is over, get back in the cockpit and get back to work. What we saw with people is there was kind of a blurring of that. Okay. And so some people would log on at 6 a.m., but if you tried to have a meeting with them at 9 o'clock, they weren't available because they were at the gym doing whatever. and then they disappear at noon for lunch, but they'd go to the beach for lunch. So maybe they come back at 3 and then they work till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And, they would argue that, hey, I'm giving you 8 hours or 9 hours a day. But the problem is, if you're not giving it to us when our customers need access to you, you're not giving it to us. Right. And so we learned a few things. And so even today with our colleagues in the organization who are either remote or hybrid, if you're a hybrid, there's sort of an agreed upon schedule of which days you're in the office, which days you're not. You don't get to move it around as you see fit. And it's a bit of a contract between the employee and the employer that we revisit every 6 months. Hey, is the schedule working? Do we need to tweak it? But there's a certain amount of formality to the whole thing. And then for our staff who are fully remote, we make them sign a contract with us that essentially just says, you agree to be available during business hours. You agree to be on camera at all times when you're in meetings, all that kind of stuff. And more importantly, what it says is every 6 months, both parties will sit down and assess how the last 6 months have gone. And we'll decide if we're going to extend the contract for the next 6 months. And it's not to say that we're trying to big brother anyone. It's just to make sure that it's working for both sides, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you see that challenge today with, big organizations. Like, look at the headache JP Morgan Chase is facing right now, where, they're trying to bring their people back to the building. And a lot of their people are opposed to it. And, Jamie Dimon essentially has taken the position of, as of this date, you're here. And if you're not, we're going to treat that as your resignation. We're going to hire somebody else for the role. Right. And so that's a tough spot for any organization to be in, where you have to lay down that type of hammer. I think the other thing we learned, and it was a short-lived thing, but I don't think anybody had any choice, was, I think a lot of our clients kind of got accustomed to follow-up inspections of production being virtual, because during the pandemic, if we had plants we were certifying in China, there's no way an inspector was getting to the plant. The whole country was locked down, right? So the next best thing for us was call the client, send them a vest that they put on. The vest had in it a bunch of cameras. And then we controlled the cameras. They walked around and we looked at whatever we needed to look at. But that's a very hard way to certify a product, because you don't really know what's going on in production if you're not on the floor looking at everything, right? And so, we had some growing pains there, trying to get clients back on board with, hey, if you want the Intertek brand on your product, we've got to see what you're doing. And it's not a virtual thing. We're coming on site. We got to be able to audit, et cetera. And so, that was a learning. I think that was a learning. I think, Sean, we lost a lot of good people in the pandemic. I think sequestering people had a very negative impact on mental health. And I think we saw some really sharp people kind of go off the deep end the longer they were alone, to the point of no recovery. I mean, they ended up leaving the company and left the industry. And, it's just, as human beings, right? We're built to interact with people. We were not meant to go into go be an Eskimo in the middle of nowhere in an igloo by yourself. I mean, it's just not the grand plan. And so when you tell people you can't, hey, it's Friday today, right? If I was in Tampa, I'm pretty sure 5 o'clock, I'd be like, Sean, I'm at this bar. Why don't you come over? Let's end the weekend together, have a drink together and just catch up. You can't do that when you're virtual, and there's a limit of how much of that you're going to put up with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was one of the, there were some silver linings in everything that went on that period of time, but yeah, there were certainly some things of major concern as a result.
Yeah.
Let me expand the question to over the past few decades. How have the expectations from clients changed when it comes to testing, consulting, the type of support you provide? Have you seen, and again, when I'm talking about since you've started, right, have you seen a change on the client's side of things, on what they expect and interacting with them?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the biggest change we've seen, right, obviously, we're a big organization, and a lot of our clients are big organizations. many of them much bigger than us by many fold. And I think there's sort of an expectation of the C-suite that, look, if I'm in charge of Saint Gobain, who has all these brands that Saint Gobain, has, right? And they're into all type of construction materials, that Intertek is going to assemble the right team that looks after kind of what Saint Gobain's needs are, and be ready, willing, and able to pivot to whatever schedule they have. And I think that's a very reasonable expectation on the part of our clients. Okay. But it requires us to be a lot more disciplined and organized than maybe we were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I think it was very much a transactional business. If somebody needs something, they called you, you gave them a price. If they were interested, they brought their stuff in, you tested them, you gave them a report, right? I think now there's a lot more strategic planning, a lot more, hey, this is what we're trying to get done in the next 6 months. This is what we're trying to do in the next 2 years. Here's a timeline of when you guys need to start, when you need to be done. Are you ready, willing, and able to partner up with us on this, so the launch of our product happens as planned? I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot more of that today than before. I think we've seen a lot more consolidation in the industry. There's a lot of people are getting bought, and so the bigger companies are getting bigger, and the smaller companies are becoming fewer. And as companies expand, they try to pull all of their tech needs under one hat. And so there's complexity that comes with that, because you have multiple product lines built for multiple markets in multiple countries. That because if I own the big company, I'm trying to eliminate duplication of effort, right? So if I got 4 brands, they each make a single hung window. Why do I need 4 single hung windows? Can't I just have one? Now each of the brands is going to have stuff they're very passionate about why their design is the way it is. But if I'm the parent company, if I can go from 4 tick needs to 1, I just reduce my operating expenditure, maybe not by 75%, but at least by 50%, right?
Right.
And so we see a lot more of our clients requiring us to evolve quicker, to be able to give them key account support, to be able to connect all the dots where they have one single point of contact that kind of manages everything on the Intertek side. We have one single point of contact on their side that manages kind of what their needs are, which is very different than before. Number 2, everything needs to be faster, everything. I mean, if I walk in today for a test, when I'm walking out at 5:00, why isn't my report in my hand? And that's really, I think that's an area that I'm spending a lot of focus on right now, is to bring a lot more automation into the client experience, a lot more digitization into the client experience. Because, I mean, Sean, the world is a different place. I mean, the stuff each of us can do from this little thing I'm holding up right now, I can run my whole life from my phone. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Exactly.
the whole thing I can do from my phone. And so imagine trying to put that into the construction industry. I mean, it's just a complex thing that we're all working super hard to figure out.
Well, and I do think the mindset, the major shift in mindsets is I need it yesterday, right? Because everything you do now can be generated so quickly and kind of at the request. And so to your point, that kind of mentality translates to business and when the expectations there. And it's interesting in your world. I mean, we used to come down to HTL, we'd hang out a week or so just to get, a couple of units tested and see if we passed or not.
Now it's like in the morning, it needs to be done.
Right. That's crazy.
I mean, the other thing is, look, I mean, when I look at it from the view of our clients, right? I mean, their reality is changing quite rapidly. Okay. A lot of big companies were significantly impacted, number 1, by the pandemic, when single point supply chains got really exposed, so I think about a company like Home Depot, who's a big Intertek client, right? And the pain they went through when China locked down, and a lot of their sourcing was coming out of China, right? Or you think about Apple, and the pain that Apple went through when China locked down. And this whole idea of companies moving production to other countries so that you don't have any SKU number that has a single source of origin, right? Like everything in the supply chain needs to have 2 or 3 source, points, so that when stuff gets shut down, you're not as exposed as if everything's coming out of one country because they happen to have the best manufacturing capability on the planet, right? Then you layer onto that, all the global uncertainty right now, right? Which, it feels a little bit like a roller coaster, even before, the current situation in the Middle East with Israel and Iran, right? Even before that, I mean, you talk about, Liberation Day, tariffs, is it 100%? Is it 10%? Is it 30%? Is it minus 5%? What's going on? It's putting a lot of pressure on the supply chain to figure out how to thread the needle, right? I mean, I remember getting a call from a client of ours who, again, I've known for 30 plus years, and he's got a real pickle on his hands because he's doing like a 25-story high rise here in West Palm Beach that went under contract 8 months ago. He sourced all his material 7 months ago. It's coming from various parts of the world, and it all needs to get here by the end of this year. But the reality is, if he accepts it today, he's going to pay probably 30 to 50% more in penalty than when he ordered the job. And obviously the job's already sold at a set price. And there was, no one thought about stuff like this 6-8 months ago, a year ago, whatever. And so, yeah, it's a complicated world right now for anybody in this industry.
Yeah, well, along those lines of supply chain disruptions, how is Intertek? How does that affect your scheduling or your approvals or meeting project deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, look, we haven't felt, I'm going to say, significant impact. We felt some, some of our clients are in other countries trying to access the U.S. market. And I mean, let's face it, Sean, the U.S. market, nobody builds stuff at the scale and volume that the U.S. does. I mean, it's just the reality of the world. Certainly not a Western economy. I mean, and so there are a lot of foreign producers that are looking to penetrate the U.S. market because it's a big market and there's room for them, right? But the reality is, what once might have been competitive really isn't if you put 100% tariff on it, or if you put a 70% tariff on it. And so we've seen those clients sort of tap the brakes a little bit just to see what's going on. But then we've seen an absolute acceleration of North American-based clients who maybe didn't pay attention to a particular market in the US, but now that foreign product is having a harder time coming in, it's made those markets more attractive to them, where they can actually, get paid what they would like to get paid for those services. And so now they're starting to ramp up their production and R&D work to flood the market with alternative materials, right? So, I mean, it's a little bit of yin and yang, but there's no doubt that, there is a kind of a fog of uncertainty hanging over production at this point.
So let's move into opportunities. So what would you say is the biggest trend or opportunity in today's market when it comes to services for Intertek? Yeah, I know resilience is a big deal right now. I'm assuming that's on the radar as one of the opportunities for growth. Where is Intertek with upcoming opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think resilience is obviously a big one. It's one that we're very focused on at this point in time, and there's a lot of work that's being done, at the group level, at our CEO's level, to really spin this thing up very fast. We're kind of organically moving into resilience, but the truth of the matter is the demand is far greater than even what we anticipated, and so we've got to kind of rethink our approach and really make an investment here. And that's the biggest opportunity of the future, because when you think about it, the cost of insurance is the single biggest pain point for anybody that owns an asset anywhere in the world. Okay. And regardless of what your opinion is on climate change or not, is it happening? Is it not happening? Regardless of what that is. Okay. Florida is hotter this year than it's ever been in the 30 years I've lived here. Okay. We've gotten more rain than we used to get 10, 15 years ago. Many parts of Florida flood now that never used to happen before, especially where you live.
Yep.
Sean, you guys have seen that. Wildfires are happening at an unprecedented rate. Tornadoes are happening at an unprecedented rate. We actually get tornadoes in South Florida now, which never happened 30 years ago, right? So again, I don't really care what your opinion is on what's causing it. The effect is still real, right? And if you want to mitigate what your pocketbook is going to bear for the cost of insurance, and you want to control that, you're going to have to, as an asset owner, make investments into the resilience of your portfolio. It's just common sense. I bought a home, Sean, in Delray Beach about a year ago, and replaced the roof on the home. Okay. And when I had the roof replaced, I went ahead and called up the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety in Tampa that and I hired one of their inspectors to make sure that the work was done in a manner that allowed me to achieve a fortified certification on my roof, even though it's not required by code. Okay. It's just something I wanted to do given the line of work that I'm in. Right.
Right.
And lo and behold, as soon as I got the fortified inspection, once the roof was done, I had my home re-inspected. So they inspected the hurricane windows, the roof, the plumbing, the air handlers, submitted all that evidence to my insurance provider, and they called me up and they said, "Hey, good news. You made this investment in your roof? Yeah. You got fortified certification? Yes, I did. Congratulations. We're lowering your premium by 50%.
50? 50?
50%.
Wow.
And I'm just one homeowner that, given that I've been in this industry for 30 years, can you imagine, Sean, if word got out that we had a hurricane and my roof blew off? People would go, "Hey, Abraham, haven't you been in this industry for 30 years? How did that happen?" Right? And so it'd be one thing if it was an old roof, but if it's a roof that I had installed after I owned the house, you'd be laughing at me. You'd be like, "Come on, man, do you believe in the science or don't you believe in the science?"
Right.
But that's just me. So imagine, why do you think Tampa General spends what they do with all their flood fences, flood barriers, flood pumps, all this stuff? Why are they doing that, Sean? Because they can't afford for Tampa General to go down when Tampa Bay comes up, period. Right? So, I mean, resilience is like here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And the sooner we all start paying attention to that, the sooner we get a handle on this, because ignoring it is definitely not the answer. And the old people would come in and say, "Hey, your property is a jeopardy." And most would say, "I don't care, it's fine," right? But now that they're staring at insurance rates that are skyrocketing, there's more of a lever now for them to pay attention to what's going on. The other one that I think is equally important, maybe being overstated a little bit right now by resilience, is healthy buildings. It's the quality of the air we breathe in the buildings that we spend 80% of our time in. That's another area that Intertek is very attentive to. It's something we're scaling up at pace. And we're seeing that, right? So this whole movement of whole building air leakage testing and having functional performance specifications drive a certain amount of overall air leakage for the overall building envelope. That is all geared at, number one, improving air quality in buildings. Number two, tightening your building up so that all the effort you put into conditioning the building air stays in the building and doesn't leak out to the environment. Because the worst thing we do as a society is over air condition our buildings. You think of the CO2 emissions that are coming out of air handlers all over the world because building envelopes aren't tight enough. And so all you're doing is just running the unit higher to make up for all the cool air or warm air that's leaking out. It's a huge area of focus for us.
So with all that said, what excites you the most about the future of your space that you're in right now with Intertek?
I just think it's watching all these innovative products come out. I mean, there's so much development going on right now in building materials, in building products, in energy efficiency, in photovoltaic integration into vertical windows instead of just solar panels on roofs. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on with everybody focused on lowering CO2 footprint, right? Because I mean, Sean, our kids are 100% of the future, 100% of the future. And they're looking at us going, you clowns better do something responsible here because your decisions impact our future. You follow what I'm getting at?
Absolutely.
And I mean, I see that with my kids. I see it with some of our employees' kids who are much younger than mine, where they just have a sustainability focus to what they do, and it's not, I don't think it's certainly not something my parents ever paid attention to, and most of our generation didn't pay attention to. But kids are looking at us and they're going, come on, man, what are you guys doing here? Like, what are we doing? Is this really the best thing? I mean, the planet's got to make it. You can't just burn the house down in the process. But anyway,
yeah,
I'm fired up about that.
Yeah, I can tell, and it's great, the passion behind that, and you're in a space where you can actually start making a difference or be part of that difference. And this is kind of a good area to wrap this up. And this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, Vinu, that you think might be valuable to our audience on this topic?
Look, I think it's spend time reading, spend time understanding what's going on, both with regulatory stuff, with building codes, with climate, with new technologies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming out of the woodworks that are super exciting stuff, right? I mean, we're talking about, we have a client we're working with that has developed the whitest white that exists on the planet Earth. And when applied onto a roof, lowers the interior temperature in buildings by like 30, 40 degrees. I mean, you think about stuff like that, it's all in a cycle, right? And so if the envelope is built to be energy efficient, and the envelope is built not to leak conditioned air, it lowers the cost of operating the building, right? Which in turn lowers the CO2 that's produced, which in turn makes the planet healthier, which in turn slows down rising seawater. You follow what I'm getting? So it's all, the problem is it's a super tanker, right? So there's nothing we're going to do that's going to make it pivot immediately. It's no different, Sean. What we're trying to do from a sustainability perspective and from a resilience perspective is no different than compound interest on your money in your bank account or in your investment portfolio. You got to just keep investing in it. And if you do it, and all of us do it a little bit at a time, it's going to add up to something really big, right? And so I think for our industry, Sean, the future ahead is bright. And I would tell your listeners to get educated on the topic, because there's so much out there that we can all sink our teeth into, but it's going to take all of us kind of pushing in the same direction.
Wow. Vinu, thanks again. For anyone listening who might want to connect with you or your team, or just learn more about Intertek, what's the best way to connect?
They can just drop me an email, vinu.abraham@intertek.com. Probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Really do appreciate your time, Vinu. With that, thanks for tuning in to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we help you build authority, engage with your target audience, and grow your brand in the design and build environment. And we'll see you all next time.
All right, Sean. Thanks for the time. We'll talk to you.